Battle of Kursk is regarded as the largest tank battle in history, but what many don't know is that a brutal and massive air battle was simultaneously raging above. As hundreds of planes clashed in the skies, the pilots engaged in fierce dogfights, enduring intense anti-aircraft fire and challenging conditions. This often overlooked aerial conflict played a crucial role in the outcome of the Battle of Kursk and showcased extraordinary feats of bravery and strategy by the Soviet and German air forces. So, let us uncover the hidden dimensions of one of history's most significant battle and reveal why the skies over Kursk were just as deadly and decisive as the ground below. The Luftwaffe proved indispensable during the Third Battle of Kharkov in March 1943, a major German counter-offensive that set the stage for the ambitious attack on Kursk in July. This battle highlighted the Luftwaffe's strategic importance and its role in enabling German forces to regain momentum. Soviet intelligence reports from this period vividly show the impact of German air power on the battlefield. One such report noted, "The enemy is again attacking us heavily with his air force, emphasizing the effective assaults carried out by the Luftwaffe." Another report detailed, "The movement of enemy tanks takes place under the cover of his aircraft, illustrating the integral role of the Luftwaffe in providing air cover and support for ground operations." The synergy between the German army and the Luftwaffe was not merely tactical, but a fundamental element of Germany's entire war strategy. This coordination allowed for rapid and effective responses to Soviet advances, enabling German forces to execute complex maneuvers and maintain a tactical advantage. The Luftwaffe's ability to deliver precise and powerful airstrikes, combined with the mobility and firepower of German tanks, created a brutal force that was difficult for Soviet troops to counter. As preparations for Operation Citadel, the planned offensive on the Kursk salient, intensified, the importance of this close cooperation became even more evident. Operation Citadel was aimed at eliminating the Soviet bulge at Kursk and was considered essential for regaining the initiative on the Eastern Front. The German High Command knew that success depended heavily on the Luftwaffe's continued support. The Air Force's role was to neutralize Soviet defenses, disrupt supply lines, and protect German armored divisions during their advance. In essence, the Luftwaffe's contribution to the German war effort extended beyond mere air support. It was a linchpin of their operational strategy. The effectiveness of the Luftwaffe in the Third Battle of Kharkov underscored its critical role in the German military machine and was a key factor in planning and executing future offensives, including the crucial Battle of Kursk. Without the Luftwaffe's dominance in the skies, the German army would have faced significantly greater challenges, and the prospects for Operation Citadel's success would have been considerably diminished. The Germans faced a significant challenge as the Luftwaffe was no longer the formidable force it had been in the early days of the war. German aircraft, particularly their fighters, had fallen behind technologically. The delays in introducing new equipment were catastrophic, leading to growing panic among German production chiefs. The anticipated successor to the widely used Me-109, the Me-209, had been scrapped in favour of a more advanced solution, the Me-262 jet fighter. However, less than a month before the planned attack on Kursk, production of the Me-262 was still in its nascent stages, limited to theoretical discussions and planning rather than actual manufacturing. At Kursk, the responsibility of safeguarding the German bombers largely rested on the shoulders of the Messerschmitt Bf 109G and Focke-Wulf Fw 190 fighters. These aircraft were nearly evenly matched with the Soviet Yaks and Lavochkins, with the German fighters holding a slight technological edge, while the Soviet fighters benefited from superior numbers. However, the true difference between the two forces lay in the experience of their pilots. Despite the Soviet Union instituting a new tactical training program in January 1943, designed to improve pilots' combat maneuvers and techniques for attacking small, mobile targets, the German pilots brought years of intensive aerial combat experience to the battlefield. This experience gave them a significant edge in terms of practical combat skills and effectiveness in dogfights. One particular German fighter squadron faced by the Soviets at Kursk included 11 pilots who had achieved aerial victories, highlighting the seasoned nature of the German airmen. Among them was Joachim Kirchner, a highly skilled ace credited with 148 aerial victories before the battle. On the first day of combat at Kursk, he added 2 more to his tally, bringing his total to 150. On the eve of 4th of July 1943, the Luftwaffe remained tirelessly active as preparations for Operation Citadel, the massive offensive against the Soviet bulge at Kursk, unfolded. With the operation set to commence at 0300 the following day, there was no respite for the air force. The Luftwaffe's mission was clear: deploy 1,700 aircraft to launch bombing raids and strafing attacks on the formidable defences of the Red Army. In the northern sector, General Walter Model's forces were bolstered by the 1st Air Division, commanded by Major General Paul Deichmann. Stationed around Oral, this division comprised 730 aircraft and played a crucial role in supporting Model's operations. Major General Deichmann, overseeing combat operations for the 6th Air Fleet, was tasked with coordinating the aerial assaults in this sector. Meanwhile, in the southern sector under the command of General Hans Seidemann, the 4th Air Fleet was mobilized to provide extensive air support for Field Marshal Erich von Manstein's forces. A formidable array of 1,100 bombers, ground attack aircraft, and fighters were drawn from airfields situated around Kharkov and Belgorod, poised to lend crucial aerial firepower to Manstein's offensive maneuvers. As the countdown to Operation Citadel approached 0 hours, the Luftwaffe stood ready to unleash its might in support of the German army's ambitious thrust into the heart of the Soviet defences at Kursk. The Luftwaffe's bases were scenes of organised chaos, with row upon row of aircraft standing at cockpit readiness, poised to launch into action. The operational plan called for the slower bombers to take off first and circle around, waiting for their fighter escorts to join them in the air. This strategy aimed to ensure a coordinated and protected advance toward the Soviet defences. However, the Red Air Force was not idle. Soviet intelligence had revealed that Seidemann's 8th Air Corps, known for its extensive experience in close air support, had been redeployed from the Crimea to the Kharkov-Belgorod sector. This movement did not go unnoticed, and the Soviet forces prepared to counter the Luftwaffe's efforts. Aware of the imminent threat posed by the Luftwaffe's 8th Air Corps, the Red Air Force devised strategies to disrupt the German air operations. They aimed to intercept and engage the Luftwaffe aircraft as they took off and before they could form up into their planned formations. This proactive stance by the Soviet air units added an additional layer of complexity and danger to the Luftwaffe's mission, as they faced not only the challenges of coordinating a massive air operation, but also the aggressive tactics of a well-informed and prepared adversary. Just before 0 hour, the Luftwaffe's radio eavesdroppers detected an increase in communication from the Red Air Force around the Kursk salient. The sudden surge in radio chatter among Soviet air regiments signalled that something significant was about to happen. As radar operators closely monitored their screens, they revised their initial estimate of incoming Soviet aircraft, which rose from 100 to more than 400. This was not a routine raid. An entire Soviet air army was en route to the Germans, and this was a very serious situation. The realization of the scale of the impending attack sent waves of alarm through the Luftwaffe command. One radar operator, grasping the urgency of the situation, picked up the field telephone in a panic and urgently called Mikoyanovka, the headquarters of the 8th Air Corps, located 17 miles south of Belgorod. The warning was clear. A massive Soviet aerial assault was imminent, threatening to disrupt the Luftwaffe's carefully laid plans and test their ability to maintain air superiority in the critical early hours of Operation Citadel. After receiving the urgent call from the radar stations, the duty officer at Mikoyanovka Luftwaffe base swiftly sought out General Hans Zeidemann and General Hans Jeschonek, the Luftwaffe's chief of staff, who happened to be visiting the front. The news left both men looking deeply shocked, and they both turned pale. Their heavily laden bombers were preparing to take off, but doing so would mean flying straight into the path of incoming Soviet fighters. On the other hand, delaying takeoff would risk the bombers being destroyed on the ground or as they sluggishly climbed into the sky. Mikoyanovka was a critical hub, hosting not only bombers but also valuable tank-busting aircraft. The 5 main airfields around Belgorod and Kharkov were densely packed with aircraft, making the situation even more perilous. Recognizing the immediate threat, a signal was sent out to halt the bombers' takeoff. Ground crews sprang into action, running across the airfields with thumbs up to signal the fighter squadrons to go first. Pilots quickly buckled up and began taxiing their fighters through the ranks of waiting bombers to reach the runways. This urgent reorganization aimed to ensure that the fighters could engage the approaching Soviet aircraft and provide cover for the bombers, attempting to avert a disastrous encounter that could cripple the Luftwaffe's capacity to support the ground offensive at Kursk. At Kursk, the Red Air Force held a significant numerical advantage over the Luftwaffe, boasting twice as many fighters and vastly more ground attack aircraft. This superiority was largely due to Marshal Georgy Zhukov's directive to substantially increase fighter strength in anticipation of Operation Citadel. While the Luftwaffe outnumbered the Soviet day bomber force by about 2 to 1, this was the only area where German air power held an advantage. The overall coordination of Soviet air operations was managed by Air Marshal Alexander Novikov. He was supported by his deputy, General Alexander Vorozheikin, and his newly appointed Chief of Staff, General Sergei Kudyakov. This command structure operated under the broader strategic leadership of Zhukov, who served as Stalin's Deputy Supreme Commander. To ensure effective coordination and support for ground operations, Deputy Air Army commanders were stationed at the headquarters of the ground armies. Additionally, a comprehensive network of secondary command and control centres was established within the salient. This robust command infrastructure enabled the Red Air Force to efficiently manage its superior numbers and maintain a decisive presence in the skies over Kursk, directly challenging the Luftwaffe's efforts to achieve air superiority and support the German ground offensive. Both the Soviet 16th and 2nd Air Armies were commanded by experienced leaders who had previously fought at Stalingrad. General Sergei Rudenko continued to lead the 16th Air Army, while General Konstantin Kravkovsky took over command of the 2nd Air Army from General Stepan Smirnov, who had moved to command the 17th Air Army on the southwestern front. General Fyodor Sudets assumed leadership of the 17th Air Army. Supporting these forces was the 5th Air Army under General Ivan Goryunov, which had been reconstituted after its transfer from the North Caucasus. Alongside these primary units, the flanking 17th Air Army contributed to the formidable Soviet air strength. In total, up to 3,000 Soviet aircraft were mobilized and ready to counter Germany's massive Kursk offensive. This Red Air Force, comprising fighters, bombers and ground attack aircraft, was strategically positioned to meet the German onslaught, providing robust aerial support and posing a significant challenge to the Luftwaffe during the Battle of Kursk. Zhukov recalled a critical moment in the lead-up to the Battle of Kursk. Somewhere between 2 and 3 in the morning, General Pukov rang General Rokossovsky to tell him that a captured sapper of the 6th Infantry Division had informed him that German troops were ready to begin the attack. This was to happen at approximately 3 AM on 5th of July. This intelligence, combined with a wealth of other information, played a crucial role in the Soviet preparations of the massive German offensive. A week prior, through the Lucy spy network, Stalin had received detailed information on the Luftwaffe's complete order of battle for Operation Citadel. John Cairncross, a Soviet spy operating within Bletchley Park, claimed to have played a pivotal role in this intelligence coup. He asserted that the German language intelligence he provided was genuine, giving full details of German units and locations, thus enabling the Russians to pinpoint their targets and take the enemy by surprise. Armed with this invaluable intelligence, the Soviets were able to meticulously plan their response. Orders were issued to the headquarters of Generals Rudenko and Krasovsky, who then communicated with their Air Corps commanders, setting the stage for a preemptive airstrike. The Soviets' rapid and coordinated response underscored their readiness and ability to utilize intelligence effectively, aiming to disrupt the German offensive before it could fully commence. This swift action by the Red Air Force aimed to catch the Luftwaffe off guard and gain an early advantage in the pivotal confrontation at Kursk. Krasovsky and Sudets focused their efforts not only on the airfields at Mikoyanovka, Pomerki and Soloniki outside Belgorod and Osnova and Rogan outside Kharkov, but also on other critical airfields at Barvenkovo and Kramatorskaya. Aerial reconnaissance had revealed that some of these airfields were hosting up to 150 aircraft each, making them prime targets. To make matters worse for the Germans, these airfields were overflowing with munitions. Seideman's forces had stockpiled enough ammunition for 10 missions, while Deichmann's forces had sufficient bombs for 15 days of major operations. This concentration of resources presented an irresistible target for the Soviet commanders. By striking these airfields, Krasovsky and Sudets aimed to inflict maximum damage on the Luftwaffe, crippling its ability to support the German ground offensive and seizing a strategic advantage at the critical outset of the Battle of Kursk. Mikoyanovka, Seidemann and Yashonek watched anxiously as formations of enemy aircraft droned relentlessly overhead toward the Luftwaffe's network of airfields. The critical question hung in the air: had they been quick enough in reversing the takeoff orders, or was Stalin about to obliterate the Luftwaffe air support before Operation Citadel had even started? If the Red Air Force succeeded with its audacious surprise attack, Citadel would be stillborn under a hail of Soviet bombs. Tense moments passed as the situation unfolded. The fate of the German offensive hung in the balance until it was confirmed that the Luftwaffe's 3rd and 52nd Fighter Groups were safely airborne. With their fighters in the sky, the immediate threat to the Luftwaffe's grounded bombers was mitigated. Now, the focus shifted to whether the superior tactics and experience of the German pilots would prevail against the numerically superior Soviet forces. The stage was set for a fierce aerial battle, with the outcome poised to significantly influence the success or failure of Operation Citadel, the final chance the Germans had to gain momentum on the Eastern Front. The Soviet attacking force, comprising 285 fighters and 132 ground attack aircraft from the 2nd and 17th Air Armies, anticipated an easy strike on an unsuspecting Luftwaffe. However, the situation rapidly shifted. As the Soviet pilots prepared to pounce, they were suddenly caught off guard. Emerging from the early dawn haze, swarms of German fighters, now airborne and ready, launched a fierce counterattack. The Soviet pilots, expecting little resistance, found themselves under intense assault from the Luftwaffe's 3rd and 52nd Fighter Groups. The German fighters, having quickly climbed to engagement altitude, darted out of the morning mist with aggressive precision. Across the cities of Belgorod and Kharkov, air raid sirens began to wail, signalling the imminent danger. As the Soviet formations pressed on toward their targets, their ranks were relentlessly thinned by German fighters and flak. The air corridor between Belgorod and Kharkov rapidly turned into a turkey shoot. Soviet tactics, lacking the flexibility needed to simultaneously engage in an air battle and bomb ground targets, faltered under the pressure. This intense and chaotic aerial engagement highlighted the disparity in tactical proficiency and operational readiness between the two forces. The Luftwaffe's ability to swiftly counter the Soviet attack not only protected their airfields but also ensured that Operation Citadel could proceed with its planned air support intact. The early morning sky over Kursk became a decisive theatre of conflict, where the initial advantage seized by the Luftwaffe played a crucial role in shaping the battle's outcome. Senior Lieutenant Simutenkov, piloting an Il-2 Sturmovik ground attack aircraft, had a narrow escape with the flak. He stated, "As we approached our target, I could see the anti-aircraft fire ripping through the sky," he recalled. "I held my course and could just make out some enemy aircraft taking off. This was a shock as we were convinced that we would achieve surprise and record a major success." Before he could attack, his aircraft was hit several times by anti-aircraft fire. Despite the damage, Simutenkov managed to keep control of his Sturmovik and headed back toward his own lines. He ultimately crash-landed, bringing his damaged aircraft down safely, but narrowly avoiding disaster. His experience illustrated the severe challenges faced by Soviet pilots during the chaotic and fiercely contested aerial engagements at the outset of Operation Citadel. As the plane's engines were pushed to their limits, the sky filled with swirling vapor trails. Desperate dogfights broke out, with aircraft scattering in all directions. It became a case of every man for himself. Wingmen tried to stay together, but were often separated in the confusion. Slower bombers and ground attack aircraft, still laden with their bombs, became isolated from their squadrons and were picked off by the relentless German fighters. In the chaos, the meticulously planned formations disintegrated as pilots engaged in frantic close-quarters combat. The skies over Kursk turned into a deadly melee, where experience and quick reflexes determined survival. The Luftwaffe's aggressive counterattacks and superior tactics exploited the disarray, inflicting heavy losses on the Soviet forces and underscoring the fierce intensity of the battle. General Seidemann could not believe his luck. Not long before, his bomber units had been threatened with obliteration. In no time at all, some 120 Soviet aircraft were downed, he said. Our own losses were so small as to represent total victory, for the consequence was complete German air control in the 8th Corps sector. Yeshonik was equally thankful that their fighters had saved the day. Hitler would have been furious if the Luftwaffe had been caught napping. He could just imagine the conversation if he had to personally report to Hitler the loss of an irreplaceable air corps on the very brink of Citadel. The successful defense by the Luftwaffe not only averted disaster, but also solidified their air superiority in the region. This unexpected turn of events provided a crucial morale boost to the German forces and ensured that Operation Citadel could proceed with the vital air support needed for the offensive. The early morning skies over Kursk had proven to be a decisive battleground, with the Luftwaffe emerging victorious against the initial Soviet onslaught. Zhukov was furious that the preemptive airstrike had been completely botched, he states. The Air Force made an insignificant and, to be quite honest, ineffective contribution. Raids on enemy aerodromes at dawn did not fulfill their purpose in any way at all, as the German command had its aircraft in the air by that time to assist its ground troops. The Red Air Force's efforts did little more than slightly delay the commencement of Operation Citadel. Crucially, the heavy losses suffered by Rudenko and Krasovsky's air armies during the failed strike severely hampered the Red Air Force's ability to challenge the Luftwaffe over the Kursk salient during the crucial opening stages of the ground battle. This failure left the Soviet ground forces vulnerable to German air superiority, complicating their defensive operations and giving the Luftwaffe an advantage that could have been mitigated had the preemptive strike succeeded. The Red Air Force attacks had done nothing to really impede or stop the Luftwaffe, and at about 4:30 am German aircraft began their assault on Soviet defences at Kursk. As a result, Soviet aircraft were not in a position to contest Luftwaffe supremacy on the southern flank of the Kursk salient, and in the north their responses to Luftwaffe attacks were often completely ineffectual. Despite this setback, Hitler's ground forces still failed to prevail against the deeply entrenched Soviet defences. The Luftwaffe's weakness was not apparent on July 5th, the first day of the attack, due in large part to Stalin's military strategy, which relied on the ruthless exploitation of numerical superiority. Training Soviet pilots to fight effectively and, more importantly, to survive and fight another day was not a priority. Most Soviet pilots entered combat with minimal training from flight schools. Despite many exaggerated claims about the performance of Soviet aircraft, the reality was that Germany maintained a significant technological lead on the Eastern Front. This technological edge, combined with better trained pilots, gave the Luftwaffe a notable advantage in the skies. However, the sheer numbers of Soviet aircraft and their aggressive tactics meant that the Luftwaffe still faced a formidable challenge. Despite the initial appearance of strength, the Luftwaffe's underlying weaknesses would become more apparent as the battle progressed, particularly as they struggled to maintain air superiority against the relentless waves of Soviet aircraft. The real extent of Soviet aircraft losses on July 5th remains unknown because many Russian primary sources are still concealed by obsessive state secrecy. However, pilot losses have been counted here for the first time. A total of 166 pilots died or went missing in action, including 111 junior lieutenants, the lowest Soviet officer rank, and another 22 sergeants. Both ranks were typically received by graduates of flying schools at the end of their training. The tragedy of these young Soviet pilots was that their sacrifice meant little to the regime they served, as Stalin's military could always find others to replace them. Despite their bravery and the heavy toll they paid, the relentless focus on numerical superiority over pilot training and survival underscored the harsh realities of Stalin's wartime strategy. This approach, while effective in maintaining pressure on the Luftwaffe, resulted in significant and often tragic losses among inexperienced Soviet airmen. For the Luftwaffe at Kursk, their initial victories gave the illusion of air superiority, but the reality was costly. While often cited that the Germans lost only 26 aircraft, this figure only accounts for those reported on the day. In total, German losses amounted to 55 aircraft and 20 pilots, including 23 aircraft and 12 pilots from the already overstretched fighter force. German ace Hans Grünberg, who flew on July 5th, recounted how he was urgently called back to his base under attack from Soviet Il-2s, nicknamed light furniture vans by German pilots. Despite Grünberg claiming 4 of these planes, the Soviet Air Force's relentless waves continued to overwhelm the Germans. He later observed Soviet aircraft relentlessly attacking German tanks and infantry columns. The Luftwaffe's support of ground troops, though impressive, was insufficient. On July 5th, German pilots flew 3,353 sorties targeting ground positions, with 1,982 in the southern sector, aiding SS divisions in breaching 2 of the 3 Soviet main defense lines. However, by the next evening, Generaloberst Hermann Hoth of the 4th Panzer Army requested increased Luftwaffe support for the 48th Panzer Corps, which was struggling due to inadequate air support. This strain on the Luftwaffe was evident from the outset, as they could only assist some panzer units effectively, leaving others to cope with minimal air cover. This situation was mirrored in the northern sector, where by July 7th, a German corps reported heavy bomb attacks from strong Soviet air formations, highlighting the Luftwaffe's overextension. In this massive tank battle, the Luftwaffe's limited number of tank busters proved inadequate. By late June, German industry had produced only 8 Ju-87 and 16 Me-110 tank-busting aircraft, both equipped with 37mm anti-tank guns. At Kursk, these aircraft primarily served in the northern sector, except for Hans-Ulrich Rudel, Germany's most renowned ground attack pilot, who used his personal Ju-87G in the south. On the battle's opening day, Rudel destroyed 12 Soviet tanks with his twin 37mm guns, often flying so low that his Stuka was scorched by explosions. However, Rudel was an outlier. The most effective tank buster was the armoured Henschel HS-129 with its 30mm gun. All 4 squadrons of these aircraft operated in the south, making their first significant impact on July 8th. Out of 1,380 attack sorties flown that day, HS-129s accounted for only 53. The Germans claimed to have destroyed 84 tanks by various aircraft. Even if accurate, this was merely a small dent in the overwhelming wave of Soviet armour. By July 9th, the 5th day of the offensive, the German army was teetering on the brink of failure. In the north, there was talk of a temporary pause in the offensive, while in the south, General Hoth admitted that the operation has temporarily run out of steam. And the situation was dire and clear-cut. The Luftwaffe was particularly exhausted, managing only 481 attack sorties in the north that day, just a third of the number flown on July 5. Desperation led to reconnaissance aircraft being used as improvised bombers for 110 of these sorties. Pilots were fatigued and overwhelmed. Future highest-scoring Soviet ace Ivan Kozhedub recalled Russian pilots routinely flying 3 to 4 sorties a day at the peak of the fighting, while the outnumbered Germans flew even more. German bomber pilot Oberleutnant Martin Vollmer experienced extreme fatigue and stress. Already sleep-deprived, he described idiotic flying in bad weather exacerbating the situation. On his 3rd mission on July 8th, Vollmer failed to find his target, lost his bearings and ended up bombing a Soviet anti-aircraft battery by chance before barely making it back to base. In the south, on July 9th, Unteroffizier Edmund Rossmann, an ace with 93 victories, led a weather reconnaissance mission. During confused combat in heavy clouds, one pilot was shot down, and the Me-109 of Feldwebel Ernst Lohberg, an ace with 25 victories, was damaged. Lohberg made a forced landing, and Rossmann landed to rescue him. Believing they were 12 miles west of Oboyan, they were actually closer to 20 miles west and just a mile from a Soviet communications battalion. Soviet soldiers rushed out, killing Lohberg and knocking Rossmann unconscious with a rifle butt. The Soviets captured both Messerschmitts. The Soviet Air Force tested Lohberg's aircraft, but Soviet ace captain Ivan S. Kravtsov destroyed Rossmann's new Me-109G6 while attempting to take off. Rossmann was fortunate to survive 6 years in Soviet camps. Leading to a decision that effectively acknowledged the collapse of the German plan. By July 10th, all HS-129 tank busters were ordered to the Aerial area, leaving Rudel as the sole anti-tank air force in the southern sector. With no other reinforcements available, the Germans could only reinforce one of the 2 pincers of the Citadel plan, making victory impossible. Despite this, German commanders seemed unwilling to accept this reality. HS-129 units continued flying in the south until July 12th. By this point, the Battle of Kursk had lost its significance for German strategy as the Allies landed in Sicily on July 10th. Soviet Marshal Konstantin Rokossovsky, overseeing the northern sector of the Kursk Bulge, understood the implications. He sent a message to his troops, intercepted and reported by German intelligence. The Allies have landed on the island of Sicily. The commander of the defense salutes you. Hold your positions, victory will be ours. Rokossovsky was correct. The Germans had no reserves left for their eastern forces, as the full weight of Anglo-American military power was now directed at Germany and Italy. Stalin's demands for a second front were fully met almost a year before the Normandy landings, though he never acknowledged it. The battle for Kursk was over. The best the German forces could now hope for was to avoid another Stalingrad disaster in the Aerial Bulge to the north, where a Soviet counter-offensive was imminent. The Luftwaffe made a concerted effort to maintain air superiority in order to support the retreating German forces. By the end of the battle, the Germans had conducted 24,000 sorties, losing 240 planes, while the Soviets carried out 30,000 sorties and lost 1,200 planes. Despite achieving numerical air superiority, the Germans were unable to penetrate Soviet defences and sustained irreparable losses in both pilots and aircraft. As the intensity of Allied bombings on the Western Front increased, the Luftwaffe was forced to reallocate its resources, further weakening its presence in the east. This strategic shift marked a significant decline in German air power, undermining their overall war effort and leaving the Eastern Front increasingly vulnerable to Soviet advances. And that brings our video to a close. What do you think of this lesser known aspect of the largest armoured battle of World War II? Do you believe the Germans were doomed from the start, with their strategic and technological disadvantages sealing their fate even before the first shot was fired? How do you think this moment marked a turning point for the Luftwaffe, signalling the beginning of its decline and ensuring it would never be the same again? We'd love to hear your thoughts and insights on these critical questions. Your perspective on whether the outcome was inevitable and how the Luftwaffe's performance at Kursk influenced the broader course of the war is invaluable. Please share your comments and engage in the discussion. As always, please be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. A big thanks to my Patreon members for your continued support. You can find links to my Instagram and Patreon below. I've truly enjoyed having you with me on this journey, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Take care and goodbye for now.